Hi guys, I'm Katie Room from Periapsis Press, where I review indie sci-fi and fantasy books. Today, doing an episode of The Signal, which I haven't done for a while. I have had small Twitter interactions over the course of a couple of months that individually didn't seem like enough to rant about, especially considering most of them are subjects I've ranted about before. And you can find full-length episodes on the topics if you're interested. But I thought that collectively they might make a nice little soapbox so that you can get kind of a snapshot, if you're new to the channel, of the kind of content you can expect from me. Hi to Free Narnian. Rant, Fire and Fury. We'll see. Some of them are less fire and more just like, why are they still doing this? I think that the things that make me like want to talk about stuff tend to be pretty niche. So hopefully some of these will be interesting to you guys. William Jeffrey Rankin says Katie's about to unleash heck. Jeff asks if this is my long-awaited school choice and home education rant. No, I should do one of those sooner or later. But if you guys know my opinions about adult entertainment and adult art, and like my views on the patronage of the arts and my views on the superiority of indie publishing as opposed to traditional publishing, then you pretty much can guess my take on school choice. Hi to Michael Kane too. Thank you guys so much for coming. Okay. Let's get into it. Usually with the Signal, I like to start with indie news. Don't really have anything right now for indies in general, but we are still doing the Periapsis Press book discussion on Silence and Starsong. Recently did a short with some clips, and it did very well, much better than I was expecting. So if you guys haven't seen that, you should check it out. I thought I'm with my mediocre video editing skills, and I don't necessarily think I'm super funny, but I think that the video turned out well and entertaining. So somebody who I don't think he's a subscriber commented on the short and said, tag yourself in this list of sci-fi and fantasy don'ts. And I'm really interested to see if anybody does. But 2 episodes left. We have had the second to last discussion that will post on Thursday. And then the very last story will be next Thursday. And then the Thursday after that, we were planning on doing a sort of live stream after party. And we would love to have everybody in the chat, whether you've read the book or not. Yeah, Patrick says crazy things though, so that helps to make them funny. That's very true. Where is Patrick tonight? Second thing that I usually do is I usually do a recently or upcoming review. This is The Horror of Mistvale Hall by William Jeffrey Rankin, who is in the chat, and a good friend. I will not be reviewing this on my website because I am the editor. And I felt like that was a conflict of interest. I would love to have someone guest post on it, though. Thought maybe you guys might like to see it. Finally got mine. Oh, it's the red. Oh. I know that guy. Yep. Michael Caine suggests for our live stream we should invite all the authors so we can make them cry. There's Patrick. So here, I'll put this back up. This is a really good like Halloween read. Spooky weird fiction featuring a haunted estate, an occult detective, and eldritch horrors. So this, oh, I'm sorry, guys. Gesturing too much. Jonathan Quint is the main character in this. He featured in The Shelter Most High, which was William Jeffrey Rankin's short story in Periapsis Christmas 2. Which I still don't have. I need to order other copies of that. Yes, I think it correlates to the type. So hardcover would be blue. Oh yeah, he's got it right here. Hardcover blue, paperback red, EPUB yellow. Off-white. Okay, hide this again. Usually I try to show you guys because I care about this stuff. Off-white paper. It's my preference. And really nice chapter headings. Need to move that. The formatting is just beautiful. We when we were formatting Periapsis Press, we asked William Jeffrey Rankin to give us some critical advice on some things that we could improve for the second book. So I am not disappointed here. I love these little break symbols. They'll make sense if you read the story. I'm so pleased. Gloss cover. That's also my preference. I don't like matte. I'm sure you guys have heard my rants about it. Feels funny. And I feel like the like if it gets scratches, it stands out worse than gloss. I can always wipe gloss down, but sometimes those matte covers just don't. Jeff Park asks if they're Eldritch breaks. And Michael Caine says matte for life. So yeah, I recommend this book highly, but it won't be appearing on my website for now. Like I said, anybody wants to read it and write a review of it themselves, I would happily guest post it. Happily. Okay, so I've got, like I said, a little collection of topics that I've had little interactions with, I think from like the beginning of September. So I'll just kind of be going over those. The first one was, does art matter or only money? It was this meme that sort of sparked it. And I retweeted it. it aligns with what I believe about art, that your art matters even if it isn't making money. I've got things to say, Jeff Park, Katie Room. um, the reason that this one sort of became something that I wanted to talk about here was actually one of my friends, uh, Royce from A Drink with Crazy. He had a slightly different take from me on it, and he suggested that your art matters if it's not making money, but only to you, which I fundamentally disagree with, especially if we're talking about art in the grand scope of all art, but also in a narrower focus on indie stuff, because it is so hard to become recognized, to make it right to a wider audience. Holding up money as evidence of success and is on some level valid, but it doesn't mean that that is what gives art significance or meaning, right? And I would suggest that there are lots of other measures of success. My big thing, right, is I love hobbyists. I think that hobbyists should pursue excellence in their art, just like professionals do. If you are doing art full time, obviously you should be doing the best that you can. But if you only have like an hour every evening to work on it, you should still be trying to do the best you can, right? The bar is low. Tradpub is really, really slipping on a lot of aspects of book as product, right? So if we as individuals care about specifically books as art, we should put in the effort and hold ourselves to the standard of goodness, beauty, and truth that we would like to see in the world, right? Success for art isn't necessarily measured in money. You can still want your art to make money, right? There's not like a mutually exclusive thing, which we kind of clashed with some like more professional authors on, or like a couple years ago. David and I, they really had trouble understanding why, if money wasn't the most important thing, why would you even try to make money? Why bother? Well, it would be nice if it made money, right? But my primary concern as a reader is not like the money. I'm on the other end of the thing, right? I'm happy to pay for people's books and pay for entertainment, and high quality is better, right? And I would pay premium for that quality. But it's like the quality that is important to me. Michael K says Katie teases spicy takes, instead gives completely reasonable take. I'm sorry. I'm starting off with a mediocre one here. Patrick says, wow, that was a couple years ago. That felt like just a few months ago. Yeah. Here's a hot take. Break all DRMs and back up your digital media. It can be done. It's not very difficult even. Clarification. David says it's not very difficult. Okay. Second one. Maybe this one will be spicier because some of it went on today. Conservatives are bad at art. I have done full length episodes on this, so Okay, I got my hackles all ready for this. Patrick whispers it's not. Okay. All right. I'll start with the one that happened today. Just starting with the white people spicy takes, right? uh, the Kyle man apparently said this. Why are conservatives so bad at art? Because we have jobs. I'm not certain who was supposed to have said the first part or if it was like a two-part joke. And there's problems. Michael Caine has a very nuanced take on this on his Twitter that is a possible kind explanation for it. David also had an explanation. He suggested that man is trying to do the opposite kind of humor, you know, where you say something that you don't actually believe. Trying to say that conservatives do make good art despite having jobs. And he's saying it not that way. And that's the joke. If he was here, he could explain better what his position on that is. I think that there are multiple problems with this joke, and the first, right, is the premise, right, that conservatives are bad at art. If he doesn't think that, then I don't think it's funny either way. But maybe I'm just humorless, right? But we hear so much from conservative people in more political, conservative culture war areas with larger followings say this kind of thing a lot, perfectly earnestly. So I don't think that it was necessarily wrong to assume that he would have that same take. The sort of second built-in part to this is that left-leaning artists do not have jobs without like a quality argument attached to leftist artists, right? Like artists who are not conservative or whatever. And then that implication about jobs has something that implies worth. Sort of the third thing that could be kind of assumed from this would be that good artists don't have jobs either, and they ultimately are not accomplishing anything worthwhile. So I got my hackles up a bit, and I was frustrated. He actually did respond to one of my replies about it with his typical, I've already explained the joke, and I said I wasn't going to explain it again. That joke of explaining the joke, I also don't think is funny because he's also not explaining the joke, right? So
did you see the joke that I made about explaining the joke?
I did not.
Yeah, I think you liked my
I saw your tweet about it.
Yeah. So like the idea with my tweet is that I I was saying that the joke was that he didn't mean what he was saying.
Yeah.
But I don't mean that. I don't believe that's actually what he.
Oh, okay. I get it. Okay.
It's extremely meta.
It's very meta.
Who actually liked my post got that, but that was my intention.
Okay. So, David just explained that his tweet is saying, I don't know if you guys could hear him with the way that my mic is pointed, but his tweet is saying that David doesn't actually believe, that man doesn't believe. I'm super confused. He just popped in to grab something and he's gone again. Okay, you guys have been talking. Michael Caine says, remember that Kyle will always double down and just repeat the joke when Babylon Bee jokes make people mad. Yeah. And it's not a joke. That's just autistic internet behavior. Oh, hi, Doug Wise. One of those jokes that doesn't really land because it sounds exactly like people who aren't joking. Exactly. Yes. And Michael Caine says everyone fell for his bait by going after him all weekend. Yeah. I don't mind falling for bait that allows me to have a conversation and find like-minded people. So that's fine with me. He also says, let me clarify. I think there's good reason to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I don't think the joke was good or landed, and definitely did not land outside of context. The context that I have is extremely limited for this. Patrick says his original joke was levied at a journalist who wanted him to explain how he could be joking about something, and that was his response. Now it's his catchphrase. Oh, yeah. Okay. Anne, hi. I think it's interesting that Calvin Robinson isn't mentioned much in this. I like Calvin. He, like many others, is the conservative king of shooting himself in the foot. Well, Trevor Rankin says it's joke inception. I think that's about David. Okay, so you guys could hear him. Patrick says conservatives should just take over making gay movies and explain those who get butthurt are bigots and this is the highest art possible. Free Narnian says, man sounds like he has oppositional defiant disorder or something. The real chops are the friends we made along the way. Oh, nice. He followed Michael Caine. Nice. So I call it a win. Yeah. Anne says, I think his joke is funny, but the premise is one that's obnoxious. The joke is that something doesn't exist when it does in spades. Yeah. So, like I said, there is good conservative art. It's indie, right? So that's my first problem, which I think most people had a problem with. But my second problem is with the implied making money is what is worthwhile and good and is what makes doing something worthwhile and good. So kind of links back to my first point about art matters, even if it isn't making money. This is one that happened back in September, mid-September. I'm sure most of you guys saw it. Christopher Rufo posted about Matt Walsh's Am I a Racist movie documentary thing. He says, for years, conservatives have struggled to create cultural products that engage a general audience. Most of the time, they're terrible, simplistic stories, low quality production, self marginalizing in the marketplace. The Daily Wire is doing something that nobody had done previously, produce conservative content that can prove itself in the marketplace without the support of the existing entertainment industry infrastructure, which would love to see them fail. People do not understand how difficult this is to do. Well, we kind of do, actually. So, first of all, conservative, quote unquote, cultural products are not generally a good artist's goal. And without the support of the entertainment industry is pretty much how all conservative art exists. Because TradPub has pushed out all diversity of thought, right? In favor of basically erotica and ideological lectures. And then, of course, success isn't measured by the theatrical release, right? Like the fact that Matt Walsh got his cultural product out in front of tons and tons of people does not mean that he's doing something that no one else has done, right? He has more infrastructure at his disposal than a lot of conservative artists do. So I was irritated about that one too. Jeff Park says, I don't think taking bait is usually bad, and I will never be Gen Z enough to care about whether that makes me owned. Michael Caine says, Rufo does so much good work, but my goodness, I wanted to smack my head on this one. That's the problem with these guys, right? They are all doing a separate, different aspect of the culture war than the actual producing of culture. But it's good stuff, right? It is serving a function. And it's like they don't realize that they're throwing mud at us when we would love to just support them. And if they could support us in a similar way, that would be great. Anne says, okay, if there's one thing I hate, it's I was the first. Never. And I say, never say you were the first because you probably weren't. Just say I did this back in whenever. And if you really are the first, it should be apparent. But you're almost never the only one, so stop being a drama queen. Rufo is calling someone else the first, not himself. So that's more excusable. And they are smarter than this, Walsh included. Yep. Jeff Park says, if you make your ideological lecture into erotica, they will feature it at your local elementary school. Yeah, Michael Caine had a nice post about this. He and I comment on a lot of the same things. Working in the institutions on the right lends one to a certain blindness. These institutions were built to discuss policy and politics, and they're good at that. They weren't built for art. Yeah. So, kind of echoing, right? Sort of same ideas here. Basically, right-wing indies, conservative indies who are good at art exist, and art is more than politics or money. I only have memes about politics, so those are the ones I got on here. I should make some about money, but Continuing in our train of thought, the everything is political people showed up. Michael King came out ahead on that one too. Rufo responded to him but did not follow him, but almost 100 other people did. So I won't drag out this because I just did a full length episode on all artists political, and it was fun. I had somebody argue with me in the chat. It was great. But I did have a sort of further dust up, I think a couple weeks after that episode. So I thought I would just talk a little bit again about that. The biggest argument that this group that I was arguing with had was it's the same argument, right? That politics is everything, right? You live in a society, so everything about your cultural artifact, your art, is inherently political. And if you have a value that's expressed, it's political. So that's why I used "we're living in a society," because that is what their argument boiled down to. This is the exact slide that I used in my other one. I don't want politics in my entertainment. I don't want, and what I mean by that is that I don't want to realize that the people who are producing my entertainment, the people behind my entertainment, the artist, the director, the person who's paying the money, right? Like, I don't want to realize as I'm enjoying my entertainment that they think that I'm the bad guy, or that I'm stupid. Like, I don't understand the issues. It doesn't mean that I don't prefer or desire the promotion of my own values, or that I would tolerate that kind of behavior if I agreed with them, right? I don't enjoy conservative stories that I can see through the curtain, right? And realize, oh, this is lecturing on ideology, right? Even if it's something that I agree with, it doesn't appeal to me. It takes me out of the story, out of the escapism. It breaks down. I usually point towards Christian fiction as an excellent example of this. I cannot tolerate Christian fiction that slips into morality lecturing or puppeting, right, to people who are supposed to be having this compelling argument, and then the person who is wrong, right, stands in for the unbeliever, right, in a Christian fiction context, and the person who is right, who will ultimately have the exact right thing to say, is the person who is Christian or witnessing, or I don't like that either. It takes me out of the story. It's not the purpose of my entertainment. Michael Caine says, yeah, I have less opinions on this one because it's dumb. Oh yeah, I heard about the Bluey thing. Didn't he watch like 3 minutes of it before he wrote that? And I haven't even seen 3 minutes of it, and literally everyone likes the show. Why are you complaining? Like, everyone here is in the chat mad about it now. Patrick, Christian fiction, all art is Amish fiction. William Jeffrey Rankin says, I had a similar dust up with a Twitter user when I tweeted that I don't read modern horror. Sure, yeah. See how all of these are kind of linked? Just like vaguely. Christian made fiction. This is another really interesting conversation that Michael Caine had that I have stolen. um, I read this article before Michael posted about it. What does it mean? The article was The Lost Realm of Christian Sci-Fi and Fantasy, and it talked about Christian-made fiction in particular, and sci-fi and fantasy, because it is often maligned in Christian circles, or supposedly is. Quite a few people a little bit older than me have direct experiences with that. I have never had anything like that happen. So I think it might be something that's kind of being phased out. I think more people are not so hung up on sci-fi and fantasy as somehow worse than other fiction. I think that attitude might be something that is going away. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just lucky. So Michael Caine, his response to the article is, "We are out here often publishing indie because Christian publishers make the same mistake as TradPub. They're captured by their own ideology and often expect narrative to take a backseat to message." Exactly. There followed a discussion about what does Christian made fiction mean, as opposed to, I don't know, Christian fiction. Christian fiction has clearly defined tropes and reader expectations. And there is a desire to simply say the author was Christian, so this work is Christian made. But when it comes to books and stories, genre is how readers find stuff. So if you want to use Christian made fiction as a genre label, there's going to be some issues. What it really is a reader defined genre, right? So like YA is targeted towards young adults. Obviously, that has changed quite a bit. And now if you say that you've written a YA book, that requires some context because genre expectations and tropes have evolved a bit beyond the original youthful intended target audience. I think Christian fiction is defined by who's this intended for, right? But with Christian made fiction, we're talking about who is the author. And that doesn't really tell the reader it doesn't give them very much information. Okay, before I move on to my next slide. What is going on? I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Anne says, and to the point, even new indie groups like Rabbit Room get stuck on their own ever smaller circle of what they want. Sure. Michael Caine says, every tweet I make that does well has a typo or word choice that makes no sense, including this one. William Jeffrey Rankin says, yep, it's just propaganda. And the gentleman I was speaking with actually advocated that the message should come first. Yep. So my second tweet, my second slide, sorry, here on this text on the side here over the picture is a screenshot of my tweet about it. It's I unrolled it and then took this this snapshot so that I didn't have my picture in there twice. Talking about defining what Christian-made fiction is, what we end up with is too much possible meaning, and then reader expectations aren't set because it can be so include such a diverse group of stories, right? Like, even if you just look at the stuff that I've featured on my website across genres, length, is it intended for a male demographic or a female demographic, age range, how much Christianity there is, right? Some of the stories written by Christian authors have nothing, right? Because they take place in a fantasy world or they take place in a sci-fi world where there is no direct reference to Christianity. There's others that have Christian characters or like side characters that are Christian. There's just a really broad range of theological beliefs from like Catholics who have a much wider like lore to pull from, for lack of a better word, like to Calvinists who have very specific things that are theologically like breaking points, right, for certain readers. So you have what you end up with is a simple label of Christian-made fiction might not be enough for some readers to find what they're looking for, even if they take you at your word, right? That this is someone who can say the Apostles' Creed or whatever, right? Like, the story itself is going to require additional details to recommend. So as a label for specific content, right? Specific books, it's not super useful. It certainly can't stand alone. Like my last thing that I say is any good recommendation is going to require more specification. If someone is taking your recommendation, they are going to be looking for more than just the author was a Christian. If that is important to them, they're going to be wanting, what does that mean? Does it mean what I think it means? Are we on the same page there? Yes, I think that. Yep. Let me back up here. Patrick says, I will not give Elon my $6 to fix my typos. I think it's 8 now. Dave K, hi. It says, not a materialist is a very wide category. Sure. Michael Caine says, I would counter to him that message doesn't come first, but truth does come first. A story is subservient to the truth. Yes. We're actually going to get into that a little bit here. Anne says, Natsume Soseki, who was one of Japan's premier modern novelists, had this thing about how the author's hand should not be visible at all. You shouldn't know who they are. Michael points out that the truth is different from the message TM. Soski had a huge crush on Jane Austen and wasn't very good at the concept himself. Jeff Park quotes me, Christian may not be specific enough. Yep. Michael Caine says, or a story can be a conversation directly with the present author. It goes either way. William Jeffrey Rankin says, I think to him message does equal truth. Yep. Jeff Park says, for instance, if you read a Presbyterian author, expect the Reformed Baptist character. The Reformed Baptist character in David's story died. Spoiler alert. Jeff and Josh were both a little miffed, I think. Anne says, many of the message TM peeps would tell you that everyone reasonable believes what they do. So what do you mean it isn't the truth? Yep. If you read something from David Room, expect him to take out the Baptists. You guys are making it seem like he has some sort of agenda, some sort of theological message against Baptists. Free Narnian says, it seems to me that a lot of people would be better served just reading opinion pieces than fiction. That seems like what they want. Anne says, it'd be super cool if someone with a trusted opinion did reviews. And Jeff says, I can recommend plenty of high fantasy opinion pieces. Jeff says, we were theatrically miffed. We recognized it was good writing. Michael K says, I give Elon my money because I have too many words. I have a lot of words and I have a blue check, but I still try to do it in chunks because I've found that, quite aside from looking at a wall of text and going, I'm not reading that, right? There's also a situation that I find myself in where I like part of the post, right? Where someone is making a more extended argument, and I think, oh, I agree with that one. I don't know about that. Oh, I like that one. So it's harder to just hit like on it, right? So I do still make threads. Dave K said, did Tolkien write anything that was explicitly Christian? Odd to think the best Christian writers of the 20th century didn't write any Christian fiction. Yeah, I'm not really, right? Like nothing that we would think of as Christian fiction. That's what makes it so frustrating, right? Oh, yeah, scary creaky door sound. Sorry, David came in and grabbed something again. This is his office on that end of the room. So if he needs something, he has to come in here. And usually he doesn't when I'm recording or streaming. But today he's been in twice. It's fine. I live in a house with people. Very October. Yeah. Michael Caine says, I find the small wall of text does better for me than threads. Better engagement. So that's what I tend to go with. Interesting. Do not WD-40 that door this month. Okay. Truth in fiction. So this one was interesting to me. I had no skin in this game, right? I liked this tweet and moved on, and then came back to it a little while later and was looking at some of the quote tweets and was just really surprised by the inability of people to recognize the difference between dark and grimdark and what does moral ambiguity mean. It really surprised me because it's so clear to me, I guess. Jeff Park suggests Leaf by Niggle is closer to what we would call Christian fiction. Possibly. I was thinking about that one, but I'm glad you brought it up. Michael Caine says, I saw this and don't think that I commented. No, I don't think you did. So this one I won't reference Michael in. I think it's highly telling that moral ambiguity in the original tweet here is in quotes. It says to me, this is like, moral ambiguity and not actual moral ambiguity. Because currently, what we see in entertainment, what is phrased as moral ambiguity is actually not ambiguous, but I like in my notes, I say a moral bankruptcy by pretending that there isn't a right and wrong. We see some of this. Somebody whose name escapes me, one of the ladies on Twitter who talks a lot about Tolkien and has done several posts about Rings of Power. Name starts with an E. Elway? Something like that. Talked today about how the theme of good versus evil that they claim to have actually wasn't good, actual good versus evil. I'm going to see if I can't pull it up. It shouldn't be. Yes, here we go. I will show you guys what I'm talking about. I didn't screenshot this one. Okay. They had Finrod encourage Galadriel to go further towards the darkness in order to distinguish it from the light. They had the Mithril infused with both light and darkness. Is it really about the battle between light and dark? It doesn't seem like that theme is very clear. So that, I think, isn't a good example of what I'm talking about there. The opposite of moral ambiguity would not be a moral lecture necessarily. And just because there are believable characters with both good and bad qualities doesn't mean that morality is ambiguous. Also, grimdark is not just dark things happening, because Beatrix Potter is pretty dark if you think about it too long. I did an entire full-length episode on grimdark and talked about, we defined it, talked about it in the context of an article I think called Grim Dull, and then talked about what was appealing about it. It's a really fun episode. Pretty much everybody who defines grimdark up until more recently, genres and tropes and expectations evolve, but it has always been associated with realism / nihilism. So its presence on this list makes sense, particularly irony, cynicism, and the quote unquote ambiguous morality. Yeah. Okay, scrolling back up again. Bernardian says, oh no, not the grimdark discourse. Michael Caine says, I am not your content farm. And William Jeffrey Rankin says, Rings of Power, everybody's just evil. Yes, Elway Singoyo. She has good Tolkien takes. Generally, yes. Yeah. Patrick says, oh, that one on the lower left. I forget the name, but I just heard it was great just yesterday. I believe so. I believe that is Over the Garden Wall. Vibes and the music are amazing. I haven't watched that one either, so seeing it in this context, I'm like, I might have to find that. This one happened more recently. Again, like a completely baffling conversation. The Critical Drinker posted this picture from Rings of Power and said, it's so cool that the sun was obliging enough to only shine on the elf army. Pure cinema. I have not done any more research about what Critical Drinker thinks about anything. I'm generally not super concerned about Rings of Power, but I have had several Rings of Power posts so in like the last few weeks. So maybe I am more interested than I thought. I responded to this Ben simulator because he replied, great sarcasm, but what's the point? This is clearly meant to be a symbolic visual representation of light versus darkness, and it looks fantastic. It's not meant to be logical. In a world of fantasy and magic, it's stupid to criticize such elements on a logical basis. I retweeted that symbolism should be logical and fantasy should be truthful. I am not talking about the weather. I don't care. Somebody actually responded, clouds exist and there's your logic. And it's like, are clouds responsible for the contradiction between symbolism and narrative? Because we've got some of that going on here. Anne says, drinkers just crapping on the show being lazy. Don't worry. Okay, good. I don't know how season 2 has been, but my impression from season 1 from the outside has largely been that there were writers and then there were cinematographers, and the cinematographers doing epic stuff and the writers were not. So Patrick says, I hear filmmakers can control the weather. There's been a lot of stuff about weather control lately. It's definitely a little conspiracy theory stuff. Michael Caine always reminds me of the old, you can accept dragons, elves, and talking trees, but you can't accept a 2021 BMW 5 Series 530i with optional heated seating. Why are you so bigoted? So the responses to my criticism that symbolism should be logical and fantasy should be truthful was to say that symbolism and fantasy didn't need to be logical or truthful, which they, I had multiple people that responded to me, Ben Simulator in particular. Logic and truth meant to them realism, the reality of our world imposed on fantasy. And that in order to do that, symbolism had to be like stripped down. And I just, like, I could not communicate to them effectively that that is not what I was talking about. No one is in this context arguing that clouds can't move or that they must move in a completely realistic and not coincidental way. Right? Like, that's not what is being talked about here. Now, the way that clouds move in reality impacts how we perceive the meaning of a lot of things in our fantasy stories, right? So one, like, just going with the cloud thing, right? In Lord of the Rings, so when in the movie, when Gimli says nothing, it's just a wisp of cloud, and they say it's moving fast and against the wind, like, that is taking what we know about our world and saying, well, things aren't working that way, so that must not be right. So in certain contexts, we expect stuff in our fantasy world to work the way that they do in the real world. And if it's not going to work that way, there has to be an explanation why. It has to be logical. But back to symbolism, right? Like, so with truths, it's not just scientific data, facts, right? Like the way things are in the real world. We're talking about something more fundamental. Especially if we're talking in the context of Tolkien, which Ben said my comment goes against Tolkien. I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? If you want to get my attention, just say that I am contradicting Tolkien. We're talking about things that are bigger than the weather, right? Virtues are one, grander theological truths being another. I can go on, and I have at length on this subject, right? He specifically mentions Tolkien's philosophy of escapism. And Tolkien believed that fantasy was more real, right? They're through a fantastic story, through a fairy tale, we were able to experience stuff that was more real. So I feel like I'm not going against Tolkien by saying that fantasy should be truthful. And meaning in symbolism has to be based on a logical, right, process. Part of that is consistency across the narrative to support the elements, the more real elements, the truth, capital T, right, that the story is trying to demonstrate. In this particular example, light and dark have very specific symbolic meanings, juxtaposed over elves and orcs, we have a history of a very specific symbolic meaning associated with a larger theme of good versus evil in Lord of the Rings, and of uh, the opposition of the two. That is a very, very well established symbolism. It follows a logic. The problem here is the narrative contradiction. Again, it seems like different people are working on these aspects, right? Because everything about the narrative of Rings of Power has been saying that, excuse me, guys, I'm sorry, has been saying that orcs are not irredeemably evil. They have redeeming qualities: fatherhood, family, desire to protect their kin is the one that has been most often talked about on Twitter. That is getting at a different transcendental truth, right? That we've all fallen short and need and cannot ourselves claw our way out. We need a redeemer. So that is not a wrong thing for a story to try to do. It is not, it does not go, it's not the same message, right? Maybe I shouldn't use the word message, since we were using message to mean something else earlier, right? It's not the same thematic conclusion as the light versus dark symbolism. Okay. But ultimately, right, fantasy should be truthful and symbolism should be logical. And the reason is because stories have meaning. And without these logical and truthful contexts, we don't have a way to talk about that meaning. Especially when they started talking about like how symbols can be interpreted differently by different groups of people. It's like, there's one person who wrote Lord of the Rings, right? And he knew what he was doing with his symbols. The lack of apparent purposefulness in the utilization of symbols for Rings of Power it looks sloppy. Purposeful ambiguity for the sake of making a symbol mean multiple things to different people isn't ideal. It's not a tight story. It looks, like I said, sloppy. Okay. Anne says the show doesn't think you will get it unless they tell you. Yeah, not a lot of trust in the audience. Jeff Park says, it says a movie about space wizards for children. Suspend your disbelief while the writers actively waterboard it. Yeah. Anne says, I haven't watched any of season 2 of Rings of Power. I just heard them talk about it on Friday Night Tights. Apparently the new black elf is palling around on the level with elf kings and stuff now. And they seemed to kill him off, and then he was okay like it was nothing after getting stabbed. William Jeffrey Rankin says, I don't think they knew what to do with this character after his girlfriend died. Michael Caine is like, oh, not that discourse I can get angry about. Orcs. Escapism is important. And it is important in part because it is what allows a story to communicate the transcendental truths, right? The things that are more real, the bigger stuff, right? And then when you come back to reality, right, you're able to incorporate your experience in this fantastical world where you were able to interact with those more real things. You're able to bring that back to reality, and it has a positive impact on your life, on your mental well-being, etc. Anne says, it's not like Tolkien drove himself nuts making sure all of his lore makes sense together, so he did reprints. Yeah. Michael Caine says, consolation for the sorrows of the world to just steal from Tolkien. Yeah. So, this is my big thing, right? Art matters, even if it's not making money, because of this type of thing. It matters, even if it's not, you know, accomplishing a filling, making the top 10 in as like a documentary, right? Or, filling theater seats or whatever. This is the important part. The escapism has to be effective. You have to actually escape. You can't be pulled out of the narrative by political or religious or other ideological messaging. In order for the things that matter to come through, you have to be completely invested. And this is something that Tolkien talked about as well. So I should have put the actual Tolkien quote in there. Maybe next time I will smarten up. Patrick says, Tolkien wanted to save his country's history and give it a mythos. Instead, he did just that and make money while being political and Christian. Gee, why does Katie like Tolkien again? All right. Last thing, reviews. Fiona Wolf mentioned it's easier to list why one hates a story, IP setting, characters, etc. It's why I'm trying to get better at why I like a property instead. And this is not something I'm mad about. This is something that I feel very strongly about. When I posted this, when I first started Periapsis Press, I wanted to do something different from other book bloggers, from even what I had done in the past book blogging. I didn't want to do lists of TBRs or posts about books that I didn't like or enjoy. I wanted to focus on stuff that I did like and on making every single post useful for other readers. Here is a recommendation. Every post on my website has a recommendation. And Fiona Wolf is right. It is way easier to talk about why you don't like stuff. And it took me a while to practice in order to be able to write like about 1,000 words about liking something, right? And part of that is because stuff you don't like, it pokes you, and stuff that you do like, is stuff that worked, right? And didn't intrude into your experience. So I really encourage everybody to practice thinking about what you did like of something, whether that is indie books, which I highly encourage everybody to leave reviews for, and my thing is that it's useful for readers, and it's wonderful that it also helps the author, but its primary purpose is to help other readers find it. So I've talked about these things before in other episodes. These two in particular, the first two, I talked about in my Everything is Political episode, saying if something was good escapism entertainment is useful for a reader who is looking to avoid having that ideological lecture, right? Saying that something is coming from a Christian or a conservative worldview and has certain values and themes in accordance with that is useful for somebody who does care, right, about wanting to be able to relax and not be like on their guard against their entertainment, right? So, and it can also help set expectations, right? If I know going in, there is the possibility that there will be more Christian themes, Christian imagery, Christianity, or like overt political, maybe not messaging, but political situations. For example, the St. Tommy series. Declan Finn. Christian political horror, right? Very intense stuff. And knowing that going in, having those expectations set ahead of time and not being surprised by those things, that is going to make the experience more enjoyable. And then, what did you like? Talking about what worked for you. It takes practice. But if you are wanting to help other readers and support a story that you like and enjoyed, I think it's a worthwhile thing to practice doing. Okay. And says Tolkien made his work with love and the power of friendship. Kind of true. Patrick says we were reading Fellowship today, and I liked how Boromir punched the snow on the mountain and offered him and Aragorn to carry down the hobbits. Boromir is a really great guy. I've always liked him as a character, and it makes the tragedy of his falter, and then his sort of heroic death so much more intense. I feel like if you have read the book and have more context, more character development there. Michael Caine says, which helping readers find it helps the authors. It's funny how that works. William Jeffrey Rankin says, when it's working, you don't notice, so it's harder to verbalize why. Yep. Michael Caine says, my books have more and more politics as it goes on. It's just politics from 250 years from now and has nothing to do with our politics. Very nice. this is it. My last slide. Help support indies. Try indie alternatives to mainstream media, particularly books. It's always going to be a bit more of a leap of faith with books because there's not an easy way to communicate quality. I offer my website as a list of recommendations. You can go and you can just browse by cover. Indie covers are knocking it out of the park these days. Or you can click and read the full review. I try to write about 1,000 words about what I liked and explain in depth so you are not surprised by anything if you are the kind of reader who doesn't care about spoilers. I think personal recommendations and reviews are pretty much the only way to get a good feel for the quality of a book. But it takes more work than just glancing at like a comic, right? Because you see the art and you go, well, if the story sucks, at least I have this beautiful art, right? Or a movie where you can have a trailer, right? And you experience it in 30 seconds to a couple minutes, and you have a sense of what it will look like, whether or not the acting's good, that kind of thing. You always have the sample on Amazon. Utilize it, but try it, right? That's the point. And then leave reviews for the stuff you liked, and like for the stuff that you didn't like, right? Somebody else who does want a friendly voice politically or ideologically in any sense might appeal to them when you were pulled out of the story. You writing a review about how you didn't like XYZ politics being in the story might set someone's expectations in a way that they understand what is coming, and then that experience doesn't bother them as much. So don't feel bad, right, about saying stuff that you didn't like, because it could help a reader decide that they do want to try the book. Although sometimes you always feel like, well, the author's going to see this and I don't want to hurt their feelings. But like I said, it's not necessarily the end of the world, because another reader can see it and decide to buy the book because of it. It's not the end of the world. Anne says, hey, it may seem trite, but if someone's book doesn't have love and the power of friendship, I'm out. Miss me with that nihilism. Very nice. Patrick says, I was hoping to make Michael King cry with my review. All right. That was the end of my soapbox rant on pretty much everything that I think. We didn't talk about a few things that I've done full-length episodes about, but I've definitely talked about most of these things before. So I appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with me, and I enjoy seeing you guys in the chat. And a woman who reads which I enjoy sharing books and bookish things, and and the experience with you guys. Again, I highly recommend this book. I have no financial incentive to tell you guys to go and buy it because I've already been paid, but I did review it. I did do the editing on it. So all errors and anything you don't like, you can lay at my door. I don't mind. I really, really recommend this. Great story. And you can always check out Peeves Press. I think I've talked about everything and now I'm just repeating myself. Guys, have a great night.